Um, Camilla Trinchieri has been a longtime friend, so I have to fess up to that right now. And I'm a great admirer of her work. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction. She was born in Prague to an Italian diplomat father and an American mother. Camilla came to the United States when she was 12 and returned to Italy after she graduated from Barnard College. In Rome, she worked in the movie industry as a dubbing assistant with Federico Fellini, Luchino Visconti, Lina Wertmüller, and many others. She came back to New York City in 1980, married, received an MFA from Columbia's graduate writing program, and became an American citizen. Under the pseudonym Camilla Crespi, she's published 8 amateur sleuth mysteries. As Camilla Trinchieri, she's published a literary mystery, a novel based on her mother's life during World War II, and now Murder in Chianti, the first in her Tuscan mystery series. Now, Camilla is a great presenter, so she's going to speak. And then at the end, I'm going to look at I have some questions, and I'll look at your questions from the chat room. Okay, Camilla?
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Debbie, thank you. And Linda, good friend, her work I admire, her collages. Thank you very much for having me. I became a writer. There's something funny about, you work with transitions, right? Women who have transitioned for many reasons. I have transitioned for very many reasons, changing countries. By the time I was 12, I had lived in 4 countries, spoke 4 languages. In other words, I never rooted, except for the many years that I did spend in Italy. That was home. And then finally trying to find roots here. And what got me started writing is funny, is there's something to do with America, that when you are transitioning, when you are all of a sudden in a new place and you don't have roots, you don't know how the new place works, you don't know who the people are, and you want to learn to insert yourself, to start anew. And for some reason, I found writing a way of helping me, not when I was that young, but when I came the first time to this country when I was 12, went to 7th grade to a wonderful school in New Orleans, I started writing. I started writing these incredibly sad stories, depressing. And then, of course, I got older, I got to know people, boys came in, hormones started flying, I stopped writing. When I came back to the United States, then I worked in Italy for, again, always with actors and famous directors, and it was very exciting. And then I came back to this country to start anew. My personal life had crashed, and it was time to find a new way of living. And I came back here because I remembered how happy I had been here at Barnard. And guess what I started doing? I started writing. So for me, America has unleashed a wonderful part of my creative self that has helped me tremendously. And I will now get to Murder in Chianti. I have written these other books that had to deal with the series that I wrote of the amateur sleuth mysteries that had to do with this country. In other words, I use an Italian woman changing her life, starting anew, working in an advertising agency, which is what I did. And I wrote about, and I didn't write about Italy. Yes, I did have one where she goes back to Italy to talk to her mother. But when I went to a vacation with my husband in Tuscany, we went from Siena all the way to Florence, and we stopped in little towns, and we spent 1 week in Pansano. And there was just something about the place that resonated, that made me feel, I want to stay here. I want to know these people. And I said to Stuart, I want to write about this town. Of course, it's not this town. My town is Gravigna, very similar to Panzano, just a few miles away from Panzano. And I said to Stuart, I have to come back here. I have to get to know the place. So why don't we come back for a month? And in a month, I made friends. I met the Maresciallo, who is, they don't use the police in small towns. They use the Carabinieri, the Carabinieri are the police of the army. And I got to know him, and of course he answered all my questions, and I settled in. And finally I came home, and it took me 2 years to come up with Murder in Chianti. And I've had some interesting reactions to this, stronger reactions to this than anything else I've written. And I thought about that, and I wondered why. And I realized it was because I think apart from my famous mother book, I'm famous in the sense that my friends have, it took me 27 years to write it, and they've had enough of it, a book called Seeking Alice. I put my heart in this place. Somehow it just entered into me, and I was able to open up something I had closed down in the 40 years that I have been living here, is my Italian side. And I think it shows in the book. And I met people, and I fell in love with the friends who are in my book. I mean, they're not the friends that I actually met. These are invented friends, but I don't consider them invented. I think they sort of came to me. I discussed with someone, I don't start out writing having a plot. And a lot of mystery writers do, because a mystery, you've got to have red herrings. I don't even know who the killer is. I know the place. My sense of place is very strong, which I think comes from having traveled so much, having had to sit. I always say I stay at the edge of the carpet looking in to see what it's like. What are my surroundings like? How can I fit in? Do I want to fit in? And you learn an awful lot by listening and watching rather than participating. And that's how I managed all my transitions. And also, having worked 17 years in the movie business, what did I do? I would sit from Monday to Friday, sometimes 12 hours a day, sometimes, listening to dialogue, to listening to people act, to speak, to emote, so that I find dialogue easy, because in a way, I've been trained to listen. I also wanted to be an actress, so I act out my parts. I mean, sometimes Stuart comes into the room and there I am laughing because a character of mine has said something funny and I'm laughing with him. Or he has also seen me crying when something has happened to the character that makes me cry. And I never feel that I am guiding that character. It is the character who tells me how he or she wants to be, and she's in control. I never know. Okay, I have a sense of place. This case was Panzano, Tuscany, Chianti, the wonderful lush area that it is, that you want to stay there forever. The wonderful food, the wine, the colors. So that came easily, that's there. I was in there, that came. And then what came was the victim. That's been for all my books. The victim comes next. And then I don't know where to go. I sit down, and someone pops in and says, hello, I'd like to conduct this book of yours. And Nico, who is the protagonist, he's an American ex-homicide detective who has lost his wife, who was Italian, and she wants to be buried with her parents. So she comes back. So he brings her back to bury her in this cemetery in this small town called Gravigna. And he finds, and she has cousins. She has a cousin, a niece, actually. I always get cousins and nieces confused. She has a niece who runs a restaurant, and he feels that for reasons, he got kicked out of the police department for reasons that if you read the book, you discover. he stays there. He's got nothing left for him in the old way. And I guess thinking about it now as I speak, it's perhaps something that I felt when I came here in 1980, that the old world where I had belonged, I hadn't been kicked out of anything, but I had been kicked out of a so-called marriage, a relationship, or I kicked myself out of it. I had nothing to continue there, and neither does Nico. So he starts his life anew. And this is a parallel I am discovering as I'm speaking to you right now. I had no idea of the connection, because I'm always a little slow at connections. Anyway, so he comes, and then because he stumbles onto a dead body, and he doesn't want to have anything to do with it because he's had it with being a homicide detective. He has to go to the police, and his landlord tells him, no, there's no police here. You have to go to the Carabinieri, to the Maresciallo, the marshal. So he meets the marshal, and I have the marshal come out of the car, and I don't know who he is, but he knows who he is, and he starts telling me who he is, and I discover him through dialogue. That's how I discover who my characters are. They start speaking, and I know it sounds crazy, but that's how it works for me. It's sort of an out-of-world experience that I absolutely love. And every morning I will sit down and I'll think, okay, I need them to do this because I have to advance the story. And they don't always do that. I mean, I'll try. Sometimes I remember in my mother book, in Seeking Alice, I wrote 40 pages of the young girl, her daughter, having a relationship with a German soldier, who takes place during World War II. And after 40 pages, she said, no, I don't want to be this soldier's girlfriend. No. And I had to chuck it. It just didn't work. I couldn't, you can force it, but you can't force it, because the characters take on a life of their own. And that, for me, is the joy, for me, of writing, because I don't know what's going to happen next. Yes, sometimes they do something and I have to correct it, or else it doesn't match up with something else I've written. But it is very rare that I have to correct them. I just let them, obviously it's me doing all this, I realize that, but I am not aware that I am in control. I don't feel I'm in control. I just feel that what I'm doing is opening up a world. I'm walking into a world that's already there. These people are already formed and I meet them, and I listen to them, and I follow them. And that's what I did with Murder in Chianti. And with all the back issues I had, I mean, not issues, my background certainly was incredibly helpful to making me a writer, because I learned to listen and to watch. And now I know I often speak up, and people hardly think that I'm listening or watching because I'm very verbal, but I actually am. And I guess the need to be noticed came in early in my life. And so that's when I have an easy, I butt in a lot, as my husband likes to say. And I think Linda may have said that to me once in a while too. So that is what started me in Murder in Chianti. I want to stay with these people. I hope to write as long as I can, as long as I have the strength and mental acuity to do so. I'm just in love with them, and I'm very excited. I finished book 2, and that's going to come out next year. And then I can't wait. I have to edit book 2. I'm waiting for the edit from the editor. And then I can't wait to start on book 3. And in the early morning, that's when I wake up early. Sometimes I wake up at 5:30 or something, and I start thinking, now how do I start book 3? And then I say, and I get nervous. And then I say, Camilla, relax. Just go to the computer and listen, and something will come. They'll talk. They'll let you know. And that's how I feel. And it's wonderful. It's my happiness. It really is. And it's helped me. COVID has changed our lives completely. And I just, in a way, I mean, it's a terrible thing to say, but for me, it was a blessing, because I was no distractions, couldn't do anything. And I just sat home and I worked and I worked and I worked. And And God bless all those people who suffered. I'm sorry. Linda?
Okay, Debbie, I don't see the question, the chat box. So,
Okay, I can read those out loud. Morgan is asking, how many hours a day do you write?
Okay, I used to get to the computer around 10:30, and I would write to 4 o'clock, and then I would turn on to need relaxing. I turned on the Food Network. I'm a big foodie, and there's a lot of food in Murder in Chianti, and there always is in anything I write, except for, I think, the mother book, Seeking Alice. And then I would watch Gaia de Laurentiis or whatever. Now I've gotten older and I don't have the stamina. So I get to the computer sometimes not till 11, sometimes not till noon. And then I maybe 3.5 hours is the max. And then I crash. So that shows, it's because I'm older. But that's enough.
And then
you do it every day.
Sandy is asking, why did you publish books under a pseudonym?
Because I started writing because I wanted to write about my mother. My mother, I never lived with her. She was she became, after my birth, a paranoid schizophrenic. And I did not live with her. I lived with my Italian father. And once I was in therapy when I first came here. My sister thought it would be a good thing to sort out my transition. And the therapist, who had been a Holocaust survivor, I told him about my mother and how she had lived in Prague, which is where I was born, married to an Italian diplomat. And then it was during the war, which means he was with the fascist government. And Czechoslovakia was overrun by Germans. It was one of their satellites. And he said, it must have been very difficult for your mother as an American to live through that period. And I had never thought of it. I don't know how you think about your mothers. I always thought of my mother not as my mother. I never thought of her as a woman in her own right, without any connection to me or her children. And that just piqued my curiosity. And so I did years of research. I went to Prague, and that's because I knew I wanted to write that serious novel. When I started I tried to get to Prague, and they gave me a visa 6 months ahead. And the guy, I was in advertising at the time, in a small job. And the man, a friend of mine there, said, well, you have to keep writing. It's a muscle. It's like exercise, like piano playing. You have to start writing to exercise that muscle for the big book, as I called it, the mother book, I always called it. So I started, I couldn't get a raise from my boss in advertising. So I killed him on paper, and it's called The Trouble with a Small Raise. And that, for some reason, I got a publisher who, of course, demanded a series, or else they wouldn't publish that one. And so that got me started. But because I knew I wanted to write the mother book, I know this is a long answer, I didn't want to use Trinchieri for those books. So I used Crespi, which was, I wanted an Italian name to keep my Italian identity, and I wanted an easy name. So that became Camilla Trinchieri, Crespi, for I think 8 books. And then I shifted to Trinchieri when I did my mother book, and one before that, The Price of Silence, was also a Trinchieri, but it was also a very different, it wasn't this light amateur sleuth kind of book. It had a little bit of more meat to it. More thought, more thinking, whatever.
Jennifer is asking, who are the authors you read and appreciate?
Okay, well, on the mystery level, S.J. Roseanne and Louise Penny. That's it. I don't read that many mysteries, but I do read the 2 of them and really like them. And also Tana French. And on the other scale, on the literary, which is where I prefer to be, to read usually. They're all over the place. I mean, there's, Olive Kittredge, Olive again, don't ask me names because I'll botch them all up. I'm going to read the next thing I'm going to read is The Beekeeper of Aleppo, and then discovered that it was another one of those incredibly sad books about Syria. The most beautiful book I have read recently, and I highly recommend it, although it is a very tough read, is The Constellation of Vital Phenomena by Anthony Marra, which is about the Chechen wars. But it's so beautiful. I mean, it is devastating, but it's so beautiful and it's important for me to read literary authors to keep me. It's like when you paint, you want to study the painters who are way above you in ability, because you learn something, you glean. Everything I read, I'm learning something, even if I only translate it, and I shouldn't say only, but to a mystery. That's how, I got an MFA at Columbia, and what I learned, and in a way it ruined reading for me, because what I learned to read as an author as opposed to a reader, so that I try to understand the technique behind, and it sometimes ruins the story for me, because I'm seeing, oh, I see how he did that, or she did that. But hey, it's wonderful stuff. So I love it.
Okay, Linda, why don't you read or ask your questions now, and we'll come back to audience questions later.
Okay. So you started your second career as an older woman.
Yes.
And you mentioned you switched careers and you went back to school. I don't know how old you were. 50? Were you about 50?
When I went back to school, let me think. Yeah, I went back to school in 97.
In 80? No.
No. Oh, that's right.
It says 80. But anyway, the point
So yes, I was at least 50.
Did you
My
see
math is awful.
that you were taking a big risk by going in an entirely different direction than you had been?
No, not once. I'm blessed that way. The fact that I remember getting on, going to the airport, and my sister, who lived in Rome, she has since died, unfortunately. She took me to the airport and she said, I don't know how you're doing this. Where do you get the courage? And I said, well, I didn't think about it. I didn't think about it as courage. That's because I knew if things went badly in the United States, I could always go back to Italy. I could always find my old job back. And I don't think of risk. I just don't think that way. Because I think I was trained not to think that way. If we go back to my life, and every 4 years, changing country, changing language very often, changing friends, losing the old friends, you sort of become an island of yourself on your own, which you adapt to the various places. But I continue to be an island on my own.
What was it like being an older student? I don't know who your classmates were, but I imagine that
most of them younger.
A very interesting experience. Could you talk about that a little?
Yes. Oh, I would love to. Well, first of all, I walked in, and when I went to register, I dressed properly, after all. I mean, I'm going to school. And someone came up to me and said, oh, are you one of the teachers? And I said, no. And yes, there was there were maybe 10% were around my age. And I felt so much wiser. When we started studying, the kids would just slough it off. Oh, I didn't read that book. And I said, oh no, read it. You don't realize you're going to miss it when you're 50 years old. So I never felt intimidated. What I felt was charged. I loved being with the younger people. We did get into argument. I remember when Kuwait and the war with Kuwait started, because I was for the war. I didn't think Saddam Hussein had any right to go into Kuwait. And the young students were appalled. How could you before war and everything? But it was wonderful. And it was a wonderful atmosphere. And it perked me up. So I loved it. I love being with the younger people.
Um,
I don't have children, so I don't have younger people in my life. I mean, I do now, once I married Stuart, because I have stepchildren and grandkids, but I didn't then.
so how do you handle rejection?
Well, at first it was devastating. In fact, I knew I'm not good at rejection. I wanted to be an actress, and I realized very quickly, and I thought I had some talent, but I realized very quickly that I couldn't take the rejections, that it just, you know, I'm sorry you're not tall enough, or you're not fat enough, or you're not pretty enough, or whatever it was. I couldn't do it. So then I started getting rejections from agents, for instance, and just kept plowing ahead. I just kept plowing ahead. So, and then I learned, you know, also rejection with criticism. At first I was very defensive, and I would say, oh, you don't understand, Linda. You're just not in my wavelength. It's your fault. And then I realized, no, first of all, listen, you're good at that. Very often, Stuart would often say, for instance, he's always my first reader, and he would say, you know, chapter 3, it's just not working. And I realized that it wasn't chapter 3 that wasn't working. It was chapter 2 that wasn't working. I started losing him in chapter 2. That was the chapter to look at, not chapter 3. So I learned not to be defensive and to, again, listen and see, what are they trying to tell me? Why am I not understanding what they're telling me? And sometimes not agreeing because I felt very strongly about something, and sometimes saying, you know what, you're damn right. I need to change that. My first novel, The Trouble with a Small Raise, you know, I showed it to friends here, and oh, it's wonderful, it's wonderful, it's wonderful. And then I took it to Italy to 3 Italian friends, well, 2 American friends who spoke Italian, and an Italian friend who read English. And they all 3, without consulting each other, said, chuck the first 100 pages. I did that. I got a publisher. So, you know, you listen, you've got to listen. At first, I would have said, what do you mean chuck the first 100? But when 3 people who did not consult each other tell you the exact same thing, you listen. So you handle rejection, you got it. You learn.
Your books have been translated into many languages. Are your books received very differently?
My mother book was received very differently. It was hosannaed over there, and in Italy, it just because it's, you know, it's in a way an Italian book. They remember the war, that they were in the war. It was about an Italian father. It was about an Italian kid and a mother, although she was not Italian. They understood it. Here also, I have in here my publisher here was a university press who didn't send it out to anywhere. So I got no reviews whatsoever, and that's the death of a book. You know, a bad review at least puts you out there. And you might even read a book that got a bad review because you're interested in the subject matter. But here it was a university press, and because I sort of gave up on trying to find a good publisher. So there was the reaction. Now, I don't know about Murder in Chianti, which sold to England and to Germany. And perhaps there's a chance it sells to Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic, which would be the most exciting thing in the world. But who knows? They're looking at it now. I don't know what the reactions are. The German book isn't out yet because it took them for, you know, a long time to translate it. And the English, I have no idea. And Italy did not want Murder in Chianti, because my Italian publisher, because it's really written for people who don't know. Who are foreigners. You know, the Italians don't know what the Tuscans have to know what the Tuscans eat and that kind of thing. They already know that. So I didn't, and I expected not to get published in Italy. So
people probably don't realize this or know this about you, but you are an incredibly talented artist. And can you talk a little bit about the pleasure you get between the 2 different modes of expression?
oh yes, the art helped me incredibly with painting, helped me incredibly with writing, because I would go, I got a studio, and I would go only once a week because I had to deliver, you know, you always have deadlines. But it would divorce me from the writing. But the wonderful thing about painting is that you swish, and there it is. And you swish again, and there it is. You can paint a painting in one sitting if you want. Then, of course, you go back and you start saying, But it's a satisfaction of seeing the color, the whatever, the movement of what you've done immediately. You can't do that in a book. A book takes 2 years or a year and a half to get a sense of what you have created. A painting, it's out there in your face. And that is a wonderful, and it inspired me. It made me go back, and yes, I miss it. I had to give up the studio, but I miss it. And so then I went to ceramics because I can't paint at home because the oil paints smell, and I don't like acrylic. And nor do I have, you need a separate room, not like Linda has taken over her dining room with all her stuff. I don't think I can't do that here because I think I'd get a divorce, or he would divorce me. And so I did go to a ceramic studio. Of course, COVID has taken care of that for the year, and I think the next year. But I love it. It's inspiring. It's creating, but also again even in ceramics, even though it takes a little longer than a painting, you know, you see it. It's there. It's also like cooking. That's why I like to cook. You mush around, you do, and there it is, something that you hope is good.
I'm not quite sure how to ask this question, but being married, how has that affected your career? Has it given you some freedom that you might not have had you had been alone and solely had to take care of yourself?
Yes. They say don't go when you start writing, and even when you've been writing a long time, they always say don't quit your day job. And I was able, because of Stuart, to quit my day job. And I wanted to write, I quit the day job because I wanted to write the mother book. And he okayed it. He said it's fine. And therefore, I could not have done any of this without Stuart, without being married to Stuart. And supportive, absolutely wonderful. I mean, my first books, 3 books of the Simona series, were in paperback, and he would take the paperback and bind it in leather. Now, isn't that absolutely wonderful? So I have bound leather books, and then he bound the next one. I said, Stuart, stop it. That's ridiculous. You know, when I went into hardcover, I said, no more binding in leather. But yes, so incredibly supportive, absolutely. Probably couldn't have done it. It wouldn't have occurred to me to do it without him. Because if I'd been at a 9-to-5 job, no, I couldn't have done it. I may have started writing at night, but certainly not writing the mysteries, which is actually what got me going. And mystery writing is, why write a mystery and not a normal book? Mystery writing is something that I've taught a few things. I've taught in Italy some creative writing courses and stuff. A mystery writer gives you a mystery gives you a problem right away. All books are about a problem that needs to be solved. And it's a wonderful teaching tool, because you have the problem right there. You have a dead body. And my mysteries are never, I'm not that interested in the plot as such. I'm interested in the psychology behind what goes on when there is something as horrendous as someone being killed. And that's what fascinates me. People fascinate me. So I've learned to be fascinated by them early on, and that's why I write mysteries.
Do you find you have stepchildren, and how have they reacted to your career? Or doesn't that even come into it?
I think they get a kick out of it. They're very busy with their own careers, and I'm the old lady. So I don't know how invested they are. I think the kids, the grandkids might be interested. Not any of them are, I think, creative and interested. I mean, my one granddaughter is a mathematician, so I've lost her in that world. I wish I were that. And the other one hasn't formed yet. And I'm thinking of the girls, because the girls would be more interested. But I think they might get a kick out of, I don't know, of the fact that at this old age, that I started a new, there's a possibility that I started life again, found happiness, found a career. And so I think that's stimulating. They're very strong, both step women are very, very strong women. So they don't need me as an example at all. They will do fine, very fine. They are doing very fine. But it's nice. I represent something different to them, because none of them, one is a lawyer, one is a therapist, but also does other stuff. So I'm the sort of, I guess, maybe the kooky lady, I don't know, who paints and does ceramics and knits and cooks, whatever. Who knows what they think.
Chat questions? Debbie?
There's one question from Morgan. She said, what do you mean by the word amateur in describing your earlier books?
Someone who is not entitled to look into a murder. In other words, Simona works in an advertising agency, and someone in the advertising agency, in fact, my boss, my real boss, gets killed. So she starts looking into it. So an amateur is not, for instance, murder in Chianti, we have an ex-homicide detective and a maresciallo. They're entitled to look into a murder. That's their job. An amateur, a nosy amateur, an amateur means someone who is not a policeman or a private detective. Someone who gets involved because she's curious or he's curious. Usually amateur sleuths are usually women, usually. There are a few that are men, but that's very rare. And they're also called, these amateur sleuths are often called cozies, because there isn't a gratuitous violence in them. So they're comfortable. They're something you have with your tea and crumpets. And that's what an amateur sleuth is.
It's interesting. I was thinking about this. We talk about power is in one of the titles of this talk. And did becoming a published author give you a sense of power? I'm getting some feedback. You're maybe moving your mic in front of your mic. So something about, I didn't hear the last thing. We talked about in your title.
Power.
Power. Did becoming a published author give you a different sense of power?
No, I've never thought of power. It gave me a different sense of self. It made me feel good. And I guess that might be power. I don't try, power is, to me, is not a pleasant word. I don't like to think of it that way. To think of power, my power over someone or my power, it just made me, in a way, feel justified that I got what I wanted to do, I was able to get there. Yes, that made me feel very good about myself. Yes, I was very happy. And, the success of Murder in Chianti is doing very well. And, I'm 78 years old. Wow. That this happening at, I don't know if anyone remembers, do you remember The Ladies in the Club? It was written by a woman who was 80 years old, her first book, big mother of a book, a fun book. And, here she was, 80 years old. I remember thinking how absolutely wonderful that at 80 years old, this woman wrote this book that became a bestseller, was on the New York Times bestseller list forever and ever. And hey, it's never too late, is it?
What do you think of journal writing? What do
I think of what?
Writing.
Internal writing?
Journal.
Still don't understand you.
Writing a journal? What do you think?
Oh, journal writing, sorry. I did that when I was a teen and didn't do it for very long. I think it is a very powerful tool. I think writing is a very powerful tool. Whether you write a short story or whether you write what you are thinking, what you are feeling, I think it is a wonderful way to clarify yourself, to see what you are. You know, we're full of emotions. When something is upsetting, something horrible has happened, you can't make tails or head of it. You don't know why you're upset or you don't want to be upset. Write it out, gush it out on that paper. And no one has to see it. No one has to censor you. The worst part is that we usually censor ourselves. And that is something we should stop doing. It's okay. We can write, you know, you can read something and say, God, this is awful, or I don't like this, or I don't like myself writing this. Be kind to yourself. Leave it there. Let it germinate. From that will come something else. And I think it helps you, it helps you clarify yourself. I think it's a wonderful tool. I think writing anything is a wonderful tool.
Yourself writing a memoir?
I can't go there.
You see yourself writing a memoir?
I can't go there. I heard you. I can't go there. There is, first of all, there is too much of the family. For instance, a mother book is, you know, fiction, because I don't know. I don't know. And I don't think I can, I guess I don't want to go there. Okay. I skipped out of therapy after 6 months. I guess I can't face it. I'd rather get whatever is in me out in my murder mysteries or in my mother, and I certainly got an awful lot out on my mother book. I just can't do it. It would be wrenching. It would absolutely be wrenching. And I don't think I'd be fair.
I am out of all my questions. Are we complete with the chat questions?
Well, we have one more, and maybe we'll make this the last question. And it's actually something I was.
Well, I want to talk about cooking after this. Let me talk about cooking. Yeah.
Okay. The question again from Morgan. Morgan's asking a lot of questions, which is great.
Good. Thank you, Morgan.
Are your books read by book groups? And my follow-up question is just about not being able to really see your fans in the time of COVID. You know, book tours are virtual, and you know.
Well, I've done Zooms with the time of COVID. Do I go into book groups? I do. I've done a few. I don't know if I've gotten, you usually don't know about it unless they contact you and want you to speak up. And of course, in the time of COVID, forget it. I've done some in other books, in my Simonas, I've done a few. So did I miss going out to a bookstore? I'm not sure I did. I think because I did a lot of Zoom talks, and they felt good. And I like the questions. And very often at book readings, I don't get questions. People are intimidated, and somehow doing this, the fact that it goes through a chat, it goes to you, and then somehow more people. I used to have to plant a friend at my book readings to ask the first question. Because then, if someone's already asked it, okay, I'll have the courage to ask the next question. And I wanted to talk about, did I answer you, Morgan? I hope so. Cooking, why, I do love to cook, although I've gotten a little tired of it. But why do I always put so much food in someone asked me that question a while back, in my books. I even have it in my mother book in one scene. And I thought about that, and I realized that when I first came to this country in 1980, not the first time, I had nothing. I had very little money. I had a tiny little studio apartment that I could not invite anyone to. What did I have to offer people who did invite me or who were my friends from Barnard? I had two very good friends from Barnard. I offered my cooking ability. I can cook for them. I will go to their house and I will cook. And that made me feel good about myself, that I was offering something, because there was nothing else I could offer at that point. So I think that became a very part of my identity. And I am known as the woman who cooks. I mean, we have a lot of friends. Linda's I think the only friend I know who actually cooks and invites people to her home. All the other friends meet us at restaurants. And so it made me feel good. It made me feel I was offering something, and that I was something, that I had a talent that I could offer people as a thank you for their hospitality, for their taking me into their world when I came here knowing nothing except my 2 friends from Barnard. So that is why cooking will always be, and of course it is the Italian thing. It is the way of warming people's hearts, is by feeding them. My father was a wonderful cook. It was terrible to be in the kitchen with him, because he would say, olive oil, please, salt, please, this, that. And we would all scurry to give him everything he wanted. Also, the kitchen in my life was the warmest place. Remember, I didn't have a mother, but we did have a housekeeper, and she was the woman. She was the woman in the house. And so I would sit in the kitchen, and she would make me little breakfast. I only ate eggs. So cooking, yes, is very much a part of me. It's part of my blood. And so they are in the books.
I should
So that's
add that she, in the early books, always included a recipe at the
Yes.
end of the book. She doesn't do that anymore, but
No, but if you're a cook, like, you could follow what I'm writing, and you could make it without my saying, 2 tablespoons of this. Also in Italian cookbooks, there's no 2 tablespoons of this, and they'll say a little bit, a pinch of salt, a pinch of this, a handful of flour. They don't tell you a cup of. Nothing is precise, because they're assuming that that you have the basics about cooking. And I guess everyone does.
I really want to thank you for sharing your love of writing with all of us.
Well,
And
thank you. And write. If you've got anything going on, write it down. Okay? Thank you so much for having me. It was a joy. Thanks.